Hello, everyone, and welcome back to On Board with Barry Littleton. We have Barry with us once again. Hi, Barry.
Hey, how you doing? How's it going, man?
Good. I'm glad we had a great conversation the last time you were here, but
Thank
it
you. Thank
wouldn't be a Barry Littleton interview if we didn't go hard in the paint on melanin-dominant beans.
you. Right on. Right
Yeah.
on.
Yep, so I want to make sure that we knock it out of the park here, and it's perfect timing, fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to look at it, with society and its media puppets have been trying to push a race war on us for,
Yeah.
well, decades really, but we've been
Yeah.
seeing it picking up this year. You know, we
Yeah.
see we see Nick Cannon trying to sprinkle some things in there, and there's a lot of talk of supremacy on both sides. But what I try to promote here is sharing a message of both experiences and basing it in science. And through my research, I've done a little bit of research into like eumelanin and pheomelanin and the uh, the pinkness showing up on people's bodies and how some diseases are more prone there. But that's because it looks like me, so I want to hear what more melanin dominant beings have to say.
Yes. Yes. You got the melanin too that is very much deeply connected to the immune system. So that says a lot of things. Also, how the sun interacts different with some of us. It burns us quicker than others. Others, we have vitamin D and other things through the melanin that actually interprets information comes in through the sun. That's been also something proven through the melanin also. So, it's interesting things like that because people often want to say, oh, we're all just a human race. Yeah, we are, but we're all like different little slight phenotypes or something. You know what I mean? So I think it needs
Mm-hmm.
to be acknowledged. And when dealing with this is also talking about the subject is making the field more inclusive to where someone like myself or yourself that, is for me, not seeing any melanin dominant contactees hardly in the media, not seeing any beings that were portrayed as looking like me or melanin dominant or ethnic. They all look like, as I always got in trouble for this pretty much, the Fabio, Christy Brinkley, National Lampoon type of
Mm-hmm.
relation. That's what I saw a lot. Kevin Sorbo is Hercules. I mean, that's exactly what all the Pleiadians
Exactly.
seem to look like. I didn't hear anything about the fact that you have Aboriginals, the oldest people on this planet, that have artifacts that say that they're not just the oldest, but that they come from the Pleiades and that they were made in the Pleiadians' image, meaning
Mm-hmm.
that the first Pleiadians here were as dark as the Aborigines. See, but we don't hear about that. You know what I mean? Instead, they all look like the other caricature I said, and that's not to discredit the people that both need that. And there are a type of a Nordic and tall blondes and all that, but that is discluding the other side of the spectrum. And in that way, if we're going to advance to really being what Michio calls a Type One civilization,
Mm-hmm.
we've got to get past this stuff, man, quickly. Even to be the level of like a Star Trek, what Gene Roddenberry was trying to represent on the original series. You know.
Hey, that's exactly right, and I'm glad. And for a lot of safety reasons, I'm glad you said it first before I did, because there's the whole movement of, hey, we're all the same. We're all, well, okay, we have similarities, but all of us look different. And I mean, even when we talk about, not just black people or Mexican people or any Asian group, because there's only one country in Asia, right? White people, we all come from different countries, different cultures, different groups. We look different. Bone structure is different. We all have different contact experiences. Some are similar, some are not. But this the very basics of science and the fact that we have different health effects based on how we look at the same time.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's something that at some point we're ignorant if we don't look at it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's nothing
Why
wrong
does it have to
of
be a bad thing?
acknowledging it, and that's the beginning of also exploration. Some of the best things, funnest thing is to actually explore other cultures, to learn them about them. I just think so because, the main way to do that is food.
I
Anyway,
was about to
yeah,
say
yeah,
American
food is a
culture is
great way.
eating everyone's food.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like even when I was in Australia, I was amazed at how Americanized some of the restaurants were. You know what I mean? So that way, little things like, uh, Burger King was called Hungry Jack's, but it's the same
Right.
menu. same sign. McDonald's is McDonald's, but they call it Macca's. And like I kept tripping. My partner kept laughing because every time I see that Burger King commercial, she said, "What's so funny about that?" I said, "Well, it's the way the guy says it. It's like it's an American commercial, but it's not." The guy's going, "I don't believe it's not a Whopper. I believe it's not a Whopper." And it said for the meat, the not meat deal. I just kept laughing, man. It's just different kick.
Yeah.
But it's cool. Other cultures, other countries. It's much more fun, I think, to involve things like food and contact experiences opposed to war. We're just
Yeah.
not sharing enough, not interacting enough. But hopefully, that's what's happening on the shift of conscious right now around the planet, opposed to just all the negative stuff. That's what I really pray is going on, and
Yeah.
trying to help assist it somehow.
I'm glad that we're beginning to reach out and start the conversation, and we're not talking about it in a separatist way. We're trying to teach everyone and learn from every point that we could possibly hear. So, when you're having these experiences or beings that you met, is it the beings that themselves that were melanated, or did they seem that way, or how could you tell? Was it they're very humanoid, or was it just another being that was darker?
When getting into my personal experiences, the beings that I've encountered were mostly non-human. I've had one experience with an individual in public, actually, that I would call a charter. And these are these individuals that show up every 7 years of a lifetime contactee's experience, or experience contactee experiencer. Every 7 years, they tend to show up, and they normally approach you in a public situation, like a bus station, a library, or a mall, something like that. And it's somebody that just comes out of the crowd and says absolutely some profound things to you that are completely like world stopping, and they kind of just go off back into the crowd. It's
Mm.
some type of contact that goes on with certain of these beings that look very humanoid, but I call them charters. And the only way I've been able to isolate them is when they make contact. And when you get in the field of another human, we feel a certain way. They feel human, but more advanced. And when I say that, it's like their energy pushes you a little bit, like it rushes you a little bit. Kind of like not the same as when you're around somebody with ADHD. Their energy makes you a little nervous. This isn't quite like that, but similar in that it pushes you a little bit. And also the telepathy is different with them. So that is the way I can just, if you're into energy, you can distinguish them in that way, and the kind of the exchange that goes down, exchange. But the second one of these that I met, third one to my knowledge actually, she was melanin dominant, and I just have reason to believe that she was maybe connected to inner Earth thing going on, and something like that. But she approached me at a club I was at when I was younger, and like I said, every 7 years I was 21. So that would be the one experience I had with somebody that was melanin dominant, and I think might not have been maybe human, but not fully of Earth origin.
Something
To
else.
to a deal where this individual, as we're talking, starts probing me, and I put up a shield. I'm very shielded. When I realize she's reading me, reading some of my thoughts on the surface. So I went ahead and put up a shield, and she crashed through it. She
Hmm.
came through it. She was a stronger telepath than I, and that right really caught my attention. So I asked her. She's first of all, very attractive, and so I asked her. I said, "What ethnicity are you?" And I'll never forget her reply. She says, "I'm of Guatemalan and black descent." I mean, who talks like that, man? Most people don't talk like that, man. So little things like that, but that gives me things to acknowledge things like my friend Flaburn. She's a contactee, melanin dominant contactee, and she says that she's in communication with this matriarchy that is from Andromeda, one of the places in Andromeda, and that they're dreadlock black women that were actually ancestors of the Mayans. And it's very interesting when she says that these women have been shown entertainment for years, and they've kind of been blended in. Meaning, like when you see a woman like that in like Goldie Wood, Whoopi Goldberg in Star Trek, Guinan,
Mm-hmm.
she would be representative of that. In modern times movies, you've got Michonne from The Walking Dead, dreadlocks, got the sword, warrior type. These women are supposed to be warriors, definitely. So, and larger stature also, like 7 feet tall. So you've got Wonder Woman also, the Amazonian tribe. And most importantly, I think you've got Storm. And when you look at Storm and the descendant currently of the Queen of Sheba, she's got white hair,
Mm-hmm.
white dreadlocks. So they're saying that these have been blended in quite a bit, and you can laugh at a certain point, but then when you start looking at it, we have nothing to really say the different. And I don't know many people that are in contact with black women like that. They even say to a degree the predator represents this, but we start thinking no, but they've got the dreadlocks. But then we start thinking, well, they're reptilians. But in actuality, the Predator movie, the Predator would have been an insect.
Hmm.
If you look at the mandibles, those aren't the mandibles of a reptilian. Anyway, that's going on left. Just interesting.
Well, it's
But the
interesting that
things that
we
might
have
be hidden in entertainment.
correct. We have spots of where we believe inspiration is coming from. We have stories that line up with experiences and knowledge that is being passed down through people like your friend who are saying they're in contact with the Andromeda galaxy.
Yeah. For me, I've had a contact with some type of beings that said they were Andromedan Council, but they didn't look like that. What these beings looked like, they were blue and they were little. And
Mm.
when I say they were little, I mean they were probably about 2 feet tall, very small.
There were
Um,
Smurfs.
yeah, yeah. I mean, a little bigger than that, but as far as like, so I was on a bed, and the bed itself was maybe, 2, 3 feet off the ground. So I guess they were about more like 3 feet tall, but very, very little, man, very thin. And they said they were from that Andromeda Council, and behind them is another being that is more brown with almost a pear type of shaped head. I've got illustrations on my channel of it. It's called the biobed, the UFO biobed. I showed the experience, and I had some caricatures and illustrations done by Kasara that represents this room pretty good, and the beings as well. So, it's little things like that. But when saying they're from the Andromeda Galaxy, Andromeda Council, that's a galaxy with what, about almost how many billion stars almost? So
Mm-hmm.
that's a big place.
Yeah,
They're communicating with me, though, that they come from one of the spirals, one of the outer spirals, one of the outer arms. So that's about as most as I could get, and they start going into ways of getting to hear from there and other information that relaying during the experience.
that's
So
important to
kind
note
of
that
different type.
a lot of people bring up, oh, this galaxy or this star system, and that doesn't mean that there's only one group of people there. We're just pinpointing a location where many people could live. It could be majority one group or another, and there could be a mix of good and bad or service to self for people who want to help others, or beings rather that want to help others. Or maybe the Fabios just completely gentrified the area. Who knows?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's the thing. Most of my communications, the beings don't speak like that. And to get that name like that, I actually had to go under hypnosis to get this specific name like that. Besides just seeing the beings and knowing some of the information they gave to me, it's fragmented. I can't get in with who are you? I want to know that. So you had to go under like a deep hypnosis to try to get that information. But then when you get a name like that, it makes me see if I've been exposed to anything else, because that's a somewhat generic name that is on the internet too, and has that something I've heard that has influenced my brain and that contact itself through the divine field. That's something that
Follow,
needs to be very much noted. You know what
follow
I
the
mean?
breadcrumbs.
Especially, yeah, and especially when we're dealing with what we've discussed before, these quantum holograms of consciousness, and how when a civilization gets to like type 2, type 3, they start using the wormhole itself for their main power source. So that means when going through the quantum hologram, if there's actually when going into a wormhole, there's that exact copy on the surface. There's an organic part that holds that information called the Mako, the magnetically eternally collapsing object. That's part of the new black hole theory. So kind of like when you see a UFO and it's moving, then all of a sudden you see two, then there's one, and that's gone. That's because they're going through a frequency jump through what would be like a wormhole. So you see that quantum hologram. Now, taking that and expanding our minds on real contact modalities. When you have these type 3, 4, 5 civilizations that are so old, they might not even be in existence anymore, except through the quantum hologram. So that means the quantum hologram and the divine field they're using to interact with our brains and the contact scenario. But if our brains are already saturated with this damn reptilian, Melab, Grays, all this negative stuff, and that does work. I'm sure that's happened. That's a fact. I'm sure, but Not all of us have stuff like that. And for those of us that might have higher beings, positive beings trying to communicate with us, our brains are so saturated with that dark crap that it's influencing the nature of our contact experience. That's very real. We've got to be aware of what power we have in terms of creation and the power of our thoughts. As the beings told me, the warp fields of your thoughts are very powerful. I
Mhm.
never even thought about putting those two types of references together. You know what I mean?
So
Sorry.
if we're able to silence our mind, there's this, as you described it, there's almost like this. So there's a holographic copy that acts almost like a cave painting in a way that we're able to tap in, or that information is able to reach us, and that could be conceivably what our ancestors were able to pick up on.
hmm I think they can call it the Akashic records and all sorts of
Mm-hmm.
different things, but ultimately, or even the dream body to that extent, if you can operate within the dream body or shift your cognitive abilities into the energy body, into the dream body, you can perceive even much more of this and get more information coming to you in that way. And some of these
like a
beings
like an
exist in
astral
that way.
library.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Something else concerning that also would be contactees that have been on board craft that report seeing a light coming up, a columned light, and they touch the light. Like I've had this experience myself, and you touch it was I call this a gyro. My YouTube channel I call it the gyrospherical engine, UFO gyrospherical engine. I show the pictures and how it operates and what my limit knowledge of science and Casimir effect it is. Anyway, but this light going up, I saw people that looked partially phased out touching this light. And the beings are putting in my mind that this is the living light. It's one of the main, they call it AGLE, but the living light also. And I can see these phased out people touching the light and coming back. And I'm suffering, I'm getting sick, about to throw up from this temporal aphasia, the sickness being on board this craft, why they are not, because they're in their dream bodies apparently. So I see now why, some people are not there physically like I was. I was getting so sick, this is about to interrupt the experience itself, why they are not. But by the same token, several contactees, both physically and in these astral states, that see this light and touch the light, describe it turning into this wormhole, and they have the access to the Akashic records. That would be because the craft itself is grown, the engine, it's grown over a singularity. So the engine itself is displaced. So when you touch the light from it being generated by it, it would turn into a wormhole if you're in the dream body already, the energy body already. It makes total sense. You know what
I'm
I'm
gl-
saying?
I'm glad to hear that many people are having similar contact experiences, similar dreams, and they're able to bounce these ideas back and forth off each other. It's kind of like how you would hear stories of someone would come up with the idea for a movie or come up with the idea for a song, and they'd be like, hey, didn't I make that? And then it happened in real life. It's like you just tapped into something that is so big, might be part of a singularity, and it was being able to be dispersed through those that were allowed to see it. When it
Mm-hmm.
came to melanin beings, one place that might be giving information I heard was and correct me if I'm pronouncing it wrong, the Triangulum Galaxy or star system.
Yeah, yeah. I pumped that pretty hard, man. It's uh the Triangulum Galaxy. One is that we have, everybody's so stuck right now on the word Nephilium, or not Nephilium,
Nephilim?
Anunnaki.
Oh,
Anunnaki is so big right now, and we that's forgetting that we have cycles that go way before what's recorded there and what's recorded in Sumerian also. And you've got recorded giants that were melanin dominant, were very large. We're talking about that, not just 8, 10 feet tall like Sasquatch. We're talking more 15, 20, 25. Even go back and 25 might be standard. Go back even in the Hindu Vedas and look at some of the ancient temples and what they were saying about the giants. Whether it be Hanuman, who appeared to be like a monkey, and I hear that they have Sasquatch type of beings that give rituals, ceremonies to a footprint that
hmm.
Hanuman has supposed to be left that looks to me like it's about, oh, I don't know, man, probably 10 feet wide, 5 feet, 10 feet, 10 feet wide,
That's a
10,
big
15 feet
Bigfoot.
wide. Yeah, it's a huge one. But then again, Hanuman was supposed to be one of these gods that walked around in ancient India. They talk about that were 15, 25 feet tall.
Hmm.
So at what point, in fact, their scriptures talk about how these beings were 25, then another generation come to being 20, 15, 10, 8, 7 feet tall, all the way down. So, in looking at their history and their culture is very interesting in that way. I think that describes some of the things that we're seeing as far as what the Uranta book would even call these celestial genes, the celestial bloodlines that are being passed down. And they actually, in that book, I'll have a lot of problems with that book, but they talk about how actually when this bloodline started descending down, and going down through the races. And when looking at something like Göbekli Tepe and
Hmm.
the structures that blew out of the desert and how old they are, technically they're saying Göbekli Tepe was in service for like 4 or 5 thousand years. So you can see certain of the old sculptures that are showing things like the man without the head that's on the bird, and different things, different animals and things that actually show, I think, the washing down of these bloodlines into more of Neanderthals and things like that. So I mean, it's
So
interesting when looking at it.
were the original beings that are said to have influenced these societies connected to the Triangulum Galaxy or the Melanin beings?
Yes, I believe the first large giants, the 25 feet, a lot of them I think came from Triangulum.
Mm.
And Triangulum is very close to colliding with the Andromedan galaxy now, and us. I mean, we're all kind of in that little area there. But I think a lot of these beings came from Triangulum. And I did a video on it on my YouTube channel. It's called Triangulum Galaxy and Black Extraterrestrials, and showing some of the ways that we think are pyramids or things that might be representing the Sirius galaxy or Orion might actually be describing the Triangulum galaxy. It's a step
Hmm.
ahead, I think. So that's just one example of some of the beings over here. And there's also talk of these beings and others. There's the beings, the areas of space that are active, supposedly with melanin dominant beings, more active that we hear they come from. One would be the Pleiades that I mentioned, but the Aborigines are talking about that now. So you would have had Black Pleiadians that came here. Okay, then you've also got contactees like Des Marquet, God, David Marquet, I think it's called Des Marquet. He talked about a lot the constellation Centaurus. I've
Hmm.
heard that you actually Kemetic also the constellation Centaurus. You've got melanin dominant beings there. Also, constellation Vega, and I've heard that the Olmecs come from the area of Vega. So that takes us also more into where do some of our Hispanic type of beings originate in space? Where do some of the Asian type of beings originate in space? Another one taking this to back to Earth would be the Ebenoid races that are supposedly from the beings that come from Sirius and the brothers that come from Sirius and Vega also would be there, but they're actually down Earth now, Ebenoid species in inner Earth. And, you've got some Kemetic and also uh, black contactees like Bobby Hemmett or Dr. Valentine that talk about the inner Earth princes and how they're connected to certain tribes right now, like certain Zulu tribes and
Hmm.
different the Dinku tribe also how their connection and they have the forehead and they have illustration of them, the big head scientists as they call them. So yeah,
I'm gl-
that's
I'm glad that you brought up that when people are trying to decode star systems, there's so many freaking stars out there. They think, oh, it's this one, but if you look, it also could be conceivably another one. And we've seen
yeah.
this through people trying to decode the Bible and other meanings and other scriptures. And you brought up Indian ones, you brought up Aztec ones, and trying to figure out where these pyramids and oh, here's Orion and here's Sirius. And to tie it all together, there's the commonality that a lot of people research who are looking into Sirius and messages that came from there that realize the Dogon tribe have had a lot of contact with Sirius and they know these things and there's these scriptures and paintings and whatever and it's like how would they know these things if they don't have the science that we have today?
I mean, it's a sham to think that ancient man was doing these wheels, these square wheels, and things of that nature, and that they were any less advanced as we are now. There are several indications that they were Type 1 civilization that only was able to leave record by cave paintings. Anything else we know right now, if anybody's seen that History Channel show a few years ago called Life Without People,
Hmm.
like 60 years after nobody's here, man, even the flash drives are almost decayed, man. So I mean, you go to the 2,000 years, only cave paintings are going to last in that way. So I think there every indication that they were a Type 1 civilization, and we have certain things on this earth that I think that are still function that are remnants of that era, and also everything to show that this planet is some type of a laboratory, man. I
Hmm.
mean, you've got these beings that appear in the fossil record and they're gone. You got others that just become like fall into being called cryptids and mystic almost. These beings are just here and are just gone. They're every sign. Sasquatch would be a good example of that. How many types of them are there? There's like a recorded 5 to 7 types. I think like seven really, but I mean, but maybe more than that. But I mean, just in terms of stuff like that, those are terms of every sign of this being somebody's lab. You
Hmm.
know?
Hey, if there are five different types of Bigfoots, we're all thinking all of us are exactly the same. What are we doing to stunt our potential growth, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's amazing to me because there's a subject that has come up several times. The researcher told me that I'm to this day still exploring is that they have a type of chlorophyll in their blood and that they're trees. They're plant-based beings.
Hmm.
And it sounds so ridiculous to a certain degree, but then you start thinking about it
It's a
and the
green
things that are
Bigfoot.
seen with them regarding invisibility. And he'd even mentioned them shape shifting into trees, into tree stumps. And I tell you, I would almost laugh at that had I not had an experience at the Ascetti Ranch with some type of a squirrel that I'm sure was connected to this Sasquatch thing, and it could have been anything other than a shapeshifter. And this experience left me just it stopped my world, and I'm saying, what the that just happened? Did I just encounter a shapeshifter? I mean, that was at a point in my life where I thought those type of experiences were gone. So when dealing with that and what we may be dealing with Sasquatch types, I'm not saying every type has got chlorophyll or is plant based, but I think there's one type of them that is.
Hmm.
And it's whereas the other ones that we've heard about. So it's just food for thought. We don't know what other galactic species might be like, or what the other species that have been on this planet are truly like that aren't totally seen in the fossil record. They find so much new stuff all the time.
It's either
Speaking of that, what happened to those giant skulls of like we were talking about earlier, Lovelock Cave? What happened to a lot of these giant skulls they're finding, these giant skeletons from the
I've seen them in
mounds, Indian
museums.
mounds? You do?
No, I'm
Really?
not.
Really? Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah. That's the deal. And it makes you think, oh, there's no real conspiracy, but there is something going on there.
Hmm.
And I don't know why they want to be so against Darwinism. This is going totally against that. I'm sorry, but to hide the truth of what's going on this planet and make it so concocted is just not right, man. And I'm hoping that's what's ending right now with
It's
this
like we
whole
have we have
shift.
we have every adventure movie going on all at the same time. You'd figure
Mm-hmm.
people would want to hear about that.
Yeah.
From the Bigfoot that may or may not be bewitching squirrels out in Washington to
Mhm.
the underground beings. I'm wondering. We always hear like, oh, people are talking to beings that come from a star system or somewhere up above. Would the
Mhm.
you brought up a subterranean group? Was it the Eba? What did you call them? The
They call it
Eba
ebenoid
Ebonites.
races.
Would
Yeah,
they
yeah.
are their means of communication the same even though they're underground?
Well, my understanding is you have a lot of them that come up and walk the streets here.
Hmm.
Like example, I have a friend in England. They said that they had encountered some brothers walking down the street that they first thought were globetrotters. The globetrotters were in town, so she thought that they must have been them. Until she starts looking at how they're dressed. They're dressed in more of a type of a more dressed, and she hit them with telepathy. They hit her back. So I mean that kind of deal. They stopped and turned and looked at her. But she's a contactee. So there's little things like that. And since then, and since coming forward with this, I've had a number of contact people that will contact me and say they've encountered brothers that are taller than normal. You deal with about 7 feet tall. That sometimes they have these triangles on their heads, sometimes not, or sometimes they look like Moors, sometimes not. But that they're these brothers from another, another planet, another solar system, something. And a lot of that gets kind of thrown in so much now with the Norman Bergen thing that wrote the Ring Makers of Saturn. When I was a kid, I got guided to that book. I tried to read it, but the telemetry in it and things made it kind of difficult.
What
But
was
he
that
had said
about?
something. It's about actually that the rings of Saturn are either being created or mined by these huge craft that are like, a dozen miles long, 12
Hmm.
miles long or bigger, these huge craft. And that they're actually responsible probably for the creation of the rings. So he's presented a lot of data concerning that. And it's interesting, but some time ago he did an interview with that lady who's so hated by the black community, uh, Terry Cassidy.
Hmm.
And he'd interview with her, and he said something. It was kind of comical because he said that this ship landed in some shipyard, naval shipyard, and off came these, 7, 8 foot tall brothers. And as he called it, they were black, they were black. Everybody laughs at that, but that's what he said. And automatically everybody's saying, well, that means there's black people on Saturn. That's not what he said exactly, and that's get kind of twisted and
It's
turned.
quite a
But
jump.
in contrast, when I was younger, there was a musician that my brother was real into. My brother's a musician named Sun Ra, and Sun Ra used to come out on stage, and he had these weird hats with all these balls on them. And Sun Ra said he was from Saturn, and he was like from one of the moons of Saturn, and that Saturn had tons of more moons that we hadn't discovered. He was right on that part. So
Hmm.
just little interesting things like that that tie also melanin-dominant species to the Saturn. So just little things like that. But that's not solidified, but it's just a connection that might be there. But Norman Bergen didn't say that ship came from Saturn. He didn't say that. So
So it's
anyway,
conceivable that the people who are getting this inspiration, or the people your friend thought were the Harlem Globetrotters, could have been some kind of a hybrid mix at the same time. No.
yeah, quite possible. Or, brothers from the inner earth that come up and walk amongst us. I think you have a lot of extraterrestrial species that are so humanoid that, humanity is more than just biology, that they walk amongst us and we don't know, especially if you can't detect energy. They just walk around, especially in crowded places. Can't spot people to that degree.
Yeah, you have to
Um,
have a strong field available. I still
yeah.
haven't found the right telephone booth that I'm supposed to go in to find this underground civilization. I'm also not
Well,
having good luck finding a lot of telephone booths in 2020, but that's another story.
if
But
you do, maybe even luckier. Maybe it'll be a TARDIS, man.
right,
This is
I
better than visitation.
end up going to the one James Bond went into. I'm like, this isn't what I wanted. Now I'm on the wrong list. I wanted to be on the right list. But you brought up uh, that these beings, they have an energy field that they're able to live in. Would dark matter, not just playing off the dark thing, but would dark matter be a place they might be able to be hiding in?
Yeah, well, actually, this takes us into entities that would come from dark matter, come from melanin itself. And when
Okay.
dealing with that, the species that I've heard of coming from dark matter would be the black praying mantis. And we hear so much about praying mantis right now in the contact phenomenon. You've got different types, ones that look like that. I've seen insectoid interact with insectoid myself that was not a mantis. But, uh, these black praying mantis come from melanin, but also that they have interbred with certain melanin species and have humanoids that are hybrid humanoids from these black praying mantis that
Well,
interact with Earth.
before you
And with
jump into
these,
the black praying mantis, did you say there was a connection between melanin and dark matter?
yeah, I believe so. Yes, yes, I believe it's the same thing. They don't fully know what dark matter is, but when you look at actually melanin itself, and even when dealing with the Mako and the magnetic eternally collapsing object itself, the new black hole theory, what would actually the dark matter in that be, or even that's making the dark energy, dark expansion? It would be melanin, I believe. It's the organic component that they're not addressing. The organic component of the life of the wormhole itself and of space itself, which I believe is melanin. Does that make more sense?
Sure.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. And from what I can see, they completely cannot prove that to be false. You know what I mean?
Okay.
I haven't found anything to be able to disprove that scientifically yet. They don't seem to know, and dark matter is becoming, the physicists tear it up. Some of them say it's not possible, but melanin sure is. We know that. And there's
Hmm.
some type of organic component that we're missing there. You know,
There's a
in the same way that when I think you see the black holes on the sun, it's showing you that the sun is actually a portal. And there are many craft that use those black holes as wormholes. That the sun itself is a wormhole. The Soho, you can get on there and look at you can almost look at the sun pictures like by every couple of minutes. There's many frames that people have caught these large ships that are deflecting light or earthbound solar flares. And to see the size these ships would be that have to be the size of Jupiter, they've got to be using the sun as this portal. You
hmm
know, it's very interesting. So
so
anyway,
so mu-
sorry,
so
we're
much
talking about something
energy,
different.
so much energy there that it might be being used as a window. And it's interesting that there are always these stories of mantis beings out there, but there's one that might have significantly more melanin than the rest.
Yeah, I mean, even on Earth, where we have a black praying mantis that you don't hear much about. So in that way, but taking this a step forward, there's this hybrid species that comes here, this humanoid hybrid species that is interbred with them, and these are brothers and sisters are supposed to have a triangle on their head also, but they're supposed to be rather tall and have an extra joint, extra like almost elbow joint here, and one in the leg also. And their way of saying hello and introducing themselves is by doing some type of a dance that humans almost can't mimic, but we're
Hmm.
supposed to kind of try, but it's difficult. And this dance may last for like I don't know an hour or longer, but it's their way of saying hello and introducing.
Hmm.
So it takes us to a whole different level. I actually did a video about that with the gentleman Corey Good had actually mentioned species of brothers that have the ability to access the hologram, I'm sorry, the black hole within their individual cell molecule structure to actually do physical teleportation in that way, and that they were a species that were unconquerable by reptilians and everyone else. So that's fascinating nonetheless. But when in some ways when you describe this species, it almost connects in some ways to these black praying mantis beings, maybe another offshoot of them. So it's just it's fascinating where it begins and ends. Can't say it's all real, but nonetheless it's food for thought and things that aren't getting talked about enough. But I will say, after making that video, the amount of like tribal elders and people that reached out to me is amazing, saying that they're aware of such things and of these beings that do this, and especially like they come around every so often. So it's very fascinating in that way. So that's another type of brother you don't hear, another type of melanin dominant black extraterrestrial you don't hear about that is interacting with our populations, especially the shamans of cultures, different cultures for lineage is the way it appears. But yeah. I think you mentioned something about the doggone,
hmm
and when dealing with the doggone, they talk about the Nomo quite a bit. And there was also they talked about another species too that came with the Nomo that were more blue, but all these beings were blue. And the Nomo, the Nomo were aquatic. And if you read Robert Temple's book, the first thing the Nomo did when they came to Earth was they went straight down into the sea. And it also describes their their ships being like almost like a balloon inside, outside, a water inside, and they have these watercraft. And I kind of took that and analyzed it with the work of Louis A. Frank. He was one of those NASA scientists that had the ones that showing the one that it looks like the asteroids almost coming down. He was the one that was part of the NASA team that was looking at that, and he started making this proposition, this theory that there were these cosmic frozen water balls that created life on Earth.
Hmm.
And when dealing with that, and as the actually the you remember the tether incident, the NASA tether incident?
I'm not sure which one. There have been a lot of incidents at NASA.
There's this tether that supposedly came loose from the shuttle or from the space station.
Okay.
And when they're looking at it, you've got all these things that look almost like water, almost like amoebas, something, or these
Oh
balls
yeah,
going around
they're
it.
flying out.
Yeah, yeah, and they're trying to say it's debris and stuff, but they're obviously sentient. You can tell. So, question is, I rose when looking that the Nomo were supposed to return to Earth at one time, and they may be dimensional too. Just because they're from that sector of space doesn't mean they're in this dimension with us.
Hmm.
So, what we're seeing there around that tether, and it's amazing that that was over Africa, over almost the doggone area when that happened. Were we seeing some type of aquatic beings coming back here? Is that what
Hmm.
we were seeing? Is that we're seeing their vessels? Some of those were huge. Some of those orbs, they were very big. If you look at they measured them up compared to the tether and everything. They were very large. So it's just food for thought. I mean,
I find it very interesting that we have numerous tribes in Africa that are telling stories that have been, and experiences that have been told for generations upon generations. And we see situations that prove that what they're saying checks out far more than even stories of, Stitchin and other researchers as such.
mm,
And we see different kinds of beings, and as you bring up with the NASA incident, they could be very or significantly smaller as well.
yeah, yeah. That takes us into something else. The miniaturization of civilizations and how when you start going into type 2, type 3 civilizations that are no longer like us, type 0, using fossil fuels. Type 1 means they're using the parent star as the main power source. Type 3 is they're starting to use space as their main power source. Type 4, they're using the wormhole itself, the Kashmir effect, for their main power source. So when you start going to these higher type civilizations, you can type going into the miniaturization. The same way, what does they call that? Is it the Brownian theory that makes the transistor or the silicon chips even smaller, the microchips smaller each year?
I know what you mean.
You get more of them on there. There's some sort of theory of that. But if
Hmm.
you take that and a civilization that's doing that like we're doing it now, eventually they're going to start evolving probably down to the nanoscale
Hmm.
as a civilization. And let's go smaller than that. Let's go to the pico. They're evolving down to the pico. And we start dealing with actual physical science implants that have been removed, not the stuff that people are seeing on people, these weird devices, the real implants that have been physically removed by Dr. Lear and
Hmm.
examined showed that these things contained enough carbon nanotubes to spread several miles. Carbon nanotubes. So when we start dealing with what I'm talking about right there, this pico type of a system, you're dealing with systems, civilization that can go probably even smaller than that, and then we expand that to the concept of a Dyson sphere, an actual Death Star, similar to that, but I mean a structure, engineering structure that is over a star, a solar system itself, and you've got a civilization that has gone into the pico like that. Huh, they're going to be existing. They're going to be exploring the universe through inner space,
Hmm.
like the old movie with Martin Short. It's corny. That's a corny joke. Anyway, but seriously, but they'd be doing it through inner space in
They're
that
small
way.
but mighty.
That takes us to a all another level. And taking this and tying this into melanin dominant civilizations. All right, this is something that some scientists, every now and again, some scientists will communicate with me and they kind of disappear. Well, it's cool though. All right, they were giving the proposition, the hypothesis that when dealing with radiotropic fungus and possibly even the chaga, but more specifically radiotropic fungus, which is a type of a fungus that was found growing on Chernobyl and Fukushima on the walls, had to be removed by robots. But what it was doing is actually taking uh, gamma radiation to convert radiation into the growth cycle. I mean, that's kind of what the Hulk does. So there was theories that these scientists were saying that that could actually was sent here from a type 4 or 5 melanin dominant civilization on the pico scale to help us with radiation cleanup of this planet.
Wow.
I mean, it's definitely
Talking
food for
about going
thought.
to going the extra
Yeah.
distance to help.
And I've talked so much about how much fungus is involved in the contact scenario,
Hmm.
especially with the construction of organic craft, and how that very fungus type of a connection is symbiotically connected to our earth, to our deep biosphere. These are things that aren't being talked about in the contact scenario for real. People want to talk about, I kept saying the reptilians and the me lab and all that stuff, man. Hey, that's great. But that's taken us away from what can science and the contact scenario, the information that's coming to real contactees, do to benefit our daily life, to
Exactly.
benefit our society on the daily life. I can say I'm a contactee. Great. I don't care if people believe me or not. I'm not trying to address those people. I'm addressing the people that are contactees, people like you, people that aren't speaking out, or even afraid to talk to people about it.
No, thanks for
We're in a
calling me
time of
out.
our society,
Now I
a
gotta
time
move
of our
again.
sorry, man, I didn't
It's
mean it
all
like
right.
that.
It's
It's
all
a
right.
time of our society when it's time to bind together, and this isn't stuff that
Yeah.
should be hidden and only people looking. Well, I can't wait to ancient aliens come on. No, what about current aliens?
Yep.
Contact is going on now, and this place is in trouble, man. It's in
That's
trouble here. We got to
that's
figure
why
this out.
that's why I think so many people like your content, Barry. It's not just,
Oh,
oh, well, here are the people who are telling the story, the same story. Again. Meanwhile, the
thanks.
contactee peoples are saying, well, here's a fungus I saw here, and these beings say they're fungus here, and these small ones say they're there, and these big ones say they're there, and we don't hear it anywhere else. So maybe people should start listening to what the actual contactees are saying.
Yeah, yeah. I don't have all the answers, but it's like the span of it keeps going out, man. There's
Yeah.
definitely something going on we're not getting fully because we're being blinded by all this other stuff. I mean, I personally have probably talked to over 200 super soldiers now. I mean, the government can't do no better than that, man. I mean, come on, they can't recruit nobody different than that. I'm not
Hmm.
trying to discredit these people. Some of them seem believable, but I'm saying something else is going on that's not being addressed by the mainstream. I'm glad you're doing it, so thank you for that.
Yeah, of
Because right
course.
now this place is in trouble, and we have to go a step forward. If we're going to be like a Type One civilization, we got to get this stuff ironed out quickly.
Yep.
Because this place needs help, and there's others trying to help. We need to be able to reach out and say, "Oh yeah, please help." More than just a CE5 event. We need some scientists on this. And right now, I'll shut up, man. Things I'm doing a video. I'll be doing a video tomorrow night actually about this. About the things everybody talks about disclosure, but when it is happening, I don't see it getting addressed. Like they just released something recently called metallic glass. Metallic glass, it's a new type of metamaterial. So you look funny too. Yeah, you look at me like, whoa, yeah, it's weird, but I mean, it's one of those things. And when you look at I'm not that into Roswell, but when you look at what the people said, not the pictures we see now, but the original pieces that
Yeah.
those people have, were supposed to be some type of a shiny material that could bend and flap right back out.
Like
That's
flubber.
exactly what this metallic glass does. And it's also coming from a quasi crystal type of a difference in the structure. So you've
Hmm.
got that. You've got these new metamaterials. So this is a type of amorphous metal. I mean, it takes it from I know I'm a little bit older than you, but man, when I was like coming out of high school, it's a real big movie called The
Yeah,
Terminator 2.
I'm an old soul.
Yeah, you're an old soul, man. But I sometimes I say things like talk about Captain Kangaroo. You would know who the hell that was. But anyway,
Yeah. Hey, easy. I got two words for you if you keep that up.
I know. Oh, I like this word. You go with DX on me. I love it. It's
Yeah.
Generation X. They even have Mike Tyson doing that. He's Xing people. Anyway, man.
Yeah, yeah, yes.
I actually just saw him on what's that?
Oh, he just keeps talking about
AEW.
coming back.
Well, he was on. He's coming back. But he's on AEW, that new wrestling by
Yeah, he was.
Cody.
Cody
Yeah,
Rhodes
and
thing.
he's on there, and Jericho's out there going, your brain is fried, Tyson. You're smoking too much of that weed on that ranch."
Yeah, if Jericho says it, it must be true. He created every hold there is, apparently.
I
The
tell you
arm
that
bar and
guy.
the arm bar and the arm bar.
I tell you that guy's older than me. He's still out there kicking pretty hard. I gotta give him credit on that, man.
Jericho?
Yeah, he's pretty
Oh,
old,
yeah.
man. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
He got that genes from his dad. think it was a Yankee, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I know he's Canadian is all I knew.
yeah.
I get lost after that, but yeah, but back to the possible organisms that are trying to help in that way. So many times people say no one's helping. Screw the extraterrestrials. Screw the interdimensionals. So they're letting us just do this and that. They want us to come in here and save us from our own free will. They can only do so much. But in
Hmm.
looking at the radiotropic fungus, are there other civilizations trying to help, and we're missing it for the most part?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So it's
It's
just
not. It's
like I
not
said, it's
about
food
them
for thought.
coming to help us, with our free will. It's show us what we can do with our free will.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah, yeah,
don't tell
yeah.
me Booker T figured out what the spinneroonie was on Earth. That was an alien telling him what that was.
5 times, yeah,
That's right.
yeah. Take us to something you had mentioned earlier too, which is the contact scenario. As far as locations, the first time that I was on a craft and I could see this other being, this insectoid floating there, and I
Hmm.
call that on my YouTube channel the acid rain experience.
Yep.
Okay, and this being, I'm automatically immediately trying to formulate telepathically. Some questions are being asked before I can formulate them, which is, where are you from? And of course, what the hell do you want? But where are you from? And I'm getting back, you won't understand. And of course, being a kid at that time, I was watching Star Trek, Doctor Who, and I was reading all sorts of science. So I thought I was heavy. So I said, tell me, I understand. And then he communicates, go 900 million light years out beyond the space time continuum.
Damn.
Didn't
Like
know what that meant.
like next
Yeah,
level.
he was right.
Damn.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I didn't know what that meant. And then he says, then since you won't understand that, um, go to the third and fourth, our bases on the third and fourth planets outside of Pluto. Those are jumping off spots into your solar system, communicating due to density problems. We have density problems there. And at that time, I'm communicating back like, are you lying to me? There are no planets outside of Pluto. I don't think they even found that moon yet. And I'm getting, you don't understand. You haven't discovered it yet. Then I get to be about 34, probably. I'm sitting in my office, and I get this bulletin about these trans-Neptunian objects that they found, a different Kuiper belt outside of Pluto that they even think might be surrounding a brown dwarf out there, putting us into being in orbit by that, putting us into this might possibly be a binary solar system, binary suns. Anyway, but these trans-Neptunian objects, or several of them, are bigger than Pluto or as big, and there are like three and four. There's number three and four out there they've even named. So when I start seeing things like that later on, it backs up years later of what these beings are telling me. Another one, when he says this, I started looking for space that's 900 million light years out, and eventually I come across what's called the Abell cluster, galaxy clusters, super galaxy, the Abell, Abell, and I'm very attracted to what's called 2256. I'm sorry, 2236 Abell and 2256 also, I believe. Abell.
What's that?
Those two really, they're just something familiar about those those galaxies there. Those two, something about them. But you're
Something
going so
types.
close to what we would call the Big Bang that you're dealing with beings that can only probably come here as thought forms, whether it's in a craft or not. And then when you get beings of that type of nature that are thought forms that start coming into this solar system that are dense, the density, and more particular, this planet with that density, they start taking on corporeal forms, things that would be maybe things that their biofield had, a million years ago. And that's how you and I would perceive them. See what I mean? But of course, that's why a lot of them stay on the craft and don't come off.
That's
This
something
place
I
is dangerous, man.
That's
You
something I
know?
try to explain to people who are trying to get into spirituality or the etheric field or astral visions or any kinds of communication. Is the first step is, well, where do you think your thoughts live?
Hmm. Hmm.
Hmm.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We're just trained to not pay attention to that and to think it's, nothing and it's just quick because we're too busy having all of our energy and awareness consumed just to pay our bills, take care of our
Yeah.
family, to go to school. That takes all you got.
Well,
Very
Barry, what
little.
when someone comes up with an amazing idea or something that's groundbreaking, definitely something that's groundbreaking, so many people can't even conceive it or even entertain the idea. It's conceivable that that idea is coming from somewhere else, and they haven't been able to, you know, grow their field or attune themselves to be able to accept something like that.
Hmm.
They're
Hmm.
lost.
Yeah, it was like that when I started. That was 2014 when somebody kind of tricked me into coming forward. But I spoke about the fungus then, and since then, recently, like within the last year, okay, NASA has announced that when they try to colonize Mars, they're going to be trying to make houses out of a type of mycelium, which is a fungus, mushroom fungus, and that takes us into right now. They're using different type of fungus, mushroom fungus, to repair uh, infrastructure in cities, on bridges and buildings, and that's going there. Where did that come from, man? I have
Mm-hmm.
no doubt that somebody that was a contactee somehow made that association with how that's part of the compounds that is involved in these organic craft construction.
They walked down
How
the
else could
ladder
it
with
come?
that idea.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Mm-hmm.
mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, one thing that I'm really glad that you brought up a few minutes ago was there's so many ideas, there's so many people trying to come forward, there's so much information that is being thrown to you. People who are interested in the subject from other people on YouTube, on the internet, making their own sites through TV. A phrase you said that I really liked was you need to iron all these topics out. And today, you know, we've covered from beings that are in the stars, beings that are from other dimensions, conceivably in the water, in the earth, huge ones, and you know the smallest ones that we can't even really imagine unless you have the right contact experience. All throughout today, and throughout this episode, there's so many other topics that you know people would need to research half an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. We might get into them in the past, but there's so many breadcrumbs out there and so much knowledge coming from so many different species, especially melanin dominant ones as well. Is there anything else you'd like people to know about melanin dominant beings or the areas that they interact with?
That's the main thing, that the areas of space I mentioned that they might come from, and this takes us generally into just extragalactic contact. We hear so much, so everything is so swayed by just these spaces we hear: Orion, Sirius, Pleiades, Arcturus. It's always these places we hear in the media, even Andromeda to a certain degree. But we've got, over a trillion galaxies they're quoting now out there. So there's so many other different, like when the beings that I dealt with, say, extragalactic, interdimensional cooperative alliance, when I got over how ridiculous that kind of sounded, but they're emphasizing cooperative, and I started seeing the interdimensional when they say they go from micro to macro, really what that means, like what we just talked about on Pico to even the giants. So it kind of gets encompassing in that way. So I'll just throw melanin dominant black extraterrestrials in with that. So we have to just expand our parameters so we can talk about it more freely and just go with it like that, man. So,
All right, thanks
oh,
for.
one more thing.
Go ahead.
The blue beings from Sirius, not just the Nomo, but there are supposed to be other blue beings from Sirius that were here that are humanoids but blue. And when the firmament fell, they also turned more the radiation turned their pigment melanin more of a black, more of a darker black. That was something that I had heard comedically when I was in the 90s, actually. So
Mm-hmm.
just something to throw out there that's also worth noting as well.
Of course. Well, the world is bigger than we could ever really imagine it is, and don't let that scare you. Get excited. Thanks again, Barry.
Hey, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I like different types of conversations instead of the cookie cutter stuff, and you did that. So thank you for that, man.
Of course, hey, spiritual superclass could very well be the future, but that doesn't happen without our audience. And I'm thankful for all the viewers, the liking, the subscribing. I don't even really care, because, like, again, YouTube suppressor and all that, but you can help us out at Patreon at patreon.com/THWTV. And Barry, you have your own as well if you want to plug it.
Yeah, actually, I'm on Patreon as well, Barry Littleton, but most of my work outside of there is on YouTube. I have a website, barrylittleton.com. It will link you to my other social medias. It's not the website. I haven't developed it a whole lot, but YouTube is where a lot of my contact is. Content. Please check out the playlist on there and check it out.
Yep, and everyone else can find this episode on spiritualsuperclass.org. Have a good night.